Hello, I'm Hushi, and I'm back with another extemporaneous video. I may be a little bit quieter today than usual because, well, I've had a migraine over the weekend, so that was delightful. In any case, I wanted to come here and talk briefly today about a couple of pet peeves that I've encountered recently. They're actually some of the biggest reasons why I've kind of distanced myself from certain groups and from being identified with certain groups. But my message today is this. First, know what you're talking about when you're talking about things. Second, don't steal words because you're afraid of the word in your own language, and then use another language's word and just pretend like it means whatever you want it to mean. These are things that I find with alarming regularity, and it's one of the big things that I hated about a lot of the communities that were popping up on Tumblr but were already around in full force outside of it. As you know, my name Hushi is a Japanese term. It was given to me when I was working on small press and underground Japanese comics, and I use it to this day and treasure it because it means a great deal to me. I still have great memories of all the friends and the colleagues and all the people that were around me in those days. In some ways, I wish I could go back to those days, but in other ways, no. Because one of the big things here that I want to kind of hit home with people is that Japan is not some sort of utopia. In fact, it's got a lot of problems. Every country in the world has a lot of problems, and most every country in the world needs to deal with those problems. A huge amount of them deal with not wanting to let go of a past that really has been idealized and is no longer understood, except by people that actually study it. And of course, when people are patriotic and nationalistic, they never study the facts. They just want to feel good about their country and push that feeling on to other people, whether or not they agree. It also tends to lead to very little accountability in politics, and extremely unscrupulous and unethical, if not downright wrong or evil, laws and practices of law. I won't go into the details. I won't go into all of the particulars, but let me just say, Japan is not a pleasant country to live in, whether you're Japanese or whether you're someone who is not Japanese. There's just a bevy of different problems, and some shared problems, of the same thing. But Japan, and I also feel like I should say, like England, like a lot of the United Kingdom and the countries that were formerly associated with the United Kingdom. There's a lot of this around the world, but these countries tend to be and tend to shape societies that are oppressive, nationalistic conformists. This is seen at its extreme in Nazi Germany, to use a commonly cited example, to make it clearer to understand why this is a bad thing. There are still so many problems with Japan's sociocultural and sociopolitical landscape, and while there was a huge bounce of ridiculous amounts of nationalistic bullshit about 10 or 15 years ago, it started to sort of relax a little bit. There is a lot of optimism that maybe the era that just started with the new emperor will be better, but it's still just going to be the same country with the same problems. Changing out an emperor isn't going to help, any more than changing out the queen to a king or another queen or whatever is going to help. None of it's actually going to help if the people and the governments aren't willing to actually do something and change things. Fortunately, there are a lot of progressive-minded people in both of those countries, and in all countries around the world, really. Depends on the landscape of the country, and I mean socially and culturally, how difficult and how oppressive that is, but it is really hard. It's very challenging, and like I said, I'm not going to get into the particulars because I will be here until 2 dawns from now, but it's important to understand that there are problems with every country, and most of the things that are outlined in creative output are escapes for the author, attempts to address social problems, or attempts to create an idealized world or idealized circumstance for their story to take place. Most of the time, even in a day-to-day sort of comedy, events are taken, put in this ideal world, and skewed just enough so that they're recognizable from reality, but also distinguishable against reality. In other words, don't confuse fiction for reality, because aside from some very, very specific groups and people and friends and circumstances and so forth, you're not going to have the experience of a television show or a film or something like that in the actual country. It would be just as ridiculous as someone watching Friends and thinking that's what America is like, because it's not. You could watch Sesame Street and have a better idea of what America is like than Friends. And anybody that lives here probably knows that. But it's just as silly as people trying to tell other people that, no, you can't criticize this, that's not how it is, it's inscrutable, you can't possibly understand it, you didn't live there, you didn't grow up there, or something like that. Bullshit. If you have done the reading, and if you've done the thinking, if you are capable of critical thought, you can examine a society and something that is very clearly wrong in that society and say, this seems to be something problematic that needs to be addressed or fixed, or this is just stupid. There is so much about Japan that nowadays is just stupid. Like their censorship. Just stupid. But you say that around some people and they're just like, oh, well, you didn't grow up there so you don't know, and you're not part of their somehow inscrutable Eastern mystique and all of this stuff. It's like, bitch, I've actually seen it. I know people. I spent years as part of that society and sociocultural landscape. This is not something that escapes me. It's not something that you can easily escape when you have constant and repeated exposure to it over a long period of time. But I am just absolutely to the end of my patience with people that want to defeat any sort of intellectual argument, any sort of point, any sort of criticism that has some sort of accuracy to it and really addresses things and says, okay, call a spade, call bullshit bullshit. That's what it is. The reason why these things don't change is because people don't question them. The reason why it is so hard to get anything done with people that constantly cling on to obsolete, outmoded traditions that they don't even know where they come from is because people don't criticize them. People don't think about them, analyze and examine them. They just accept them or assume that they must be right or else we wouldn't be doing them and wouldn't have done them for so long. The singing of Japan's national anthem is one such thing. People just assumed that it was something that they had to do, and they assumed it was the official national anthem, which, in fact, it was not. Or asterisk, something along those lines. You'll really need to look into it to find out more, but still, it is something that is absolutely worthy of criticizing, especially considering all of the fuckery it's caused. But will you see that or learn about that in anime or a Japanese drama or something like that? No, you won't. But that's no reason to think that these things don't exist just because you don't see them in dramas or you don't think they're that important. If you don't know about something and someone else seems to have an idea about why this is a wrong thing, if they can express themselves intelligently, you should at the very least give them the benefit of the doubt, most especially since you yourself do not have knowledge to countermand them, or to disagree with them with any kind of backing whatsoever. So please, don't imagine that some other society, just because it's in a country where you aren't, is somehow ideal. England is the same way. It is a problem-riddled shithole in so many ways. And so is Japan, but you could not say this and have most people in a room that would be interested in hearing about Japan or England or France or whatever else. They would shout you down and say, you don't understand it. But bullshit. Which of you has taken, I don't know, a decade of French and French studies? I'd like to know, just step right up. So, do you really know anything about France if all you've done is seen films and can speak a few words in the language and maybe have read a novel or two? Well, if you keep up with the news and social studies, possibly. But that's not always how it is, and it usually is wrong to say, oh, well, they're just inscrutable, we can't possibly understand them. They're people. Their government is a government. The things that they do are things that humans do. So please, let's not refrain from criticizing other sociocultural, sociopolitical, or just cultural and political and social practices that do seem to be really quite problematic. And on the other side of the coin, another pet peeve of mine is when people, I see it in a lot of kink communities, but I also see it in a lot of other places. It's just easiest to point at in, for example, the kinbak part of the BDSM community. Kinbak is Japanese rope bondage, but some people started calling it shibari, which means like a decorative tie. And while they are affiliated, there are people that were presenting this as if it meant something different, something inscrutable and untranslatable. And if you've studied any languages, you know, like subtitles, you will start to notice people will just translate the idea of something rather than word for word, because word for word doesn't always work to convey the meaning, and you only have seconds to do that with subtitles, so you really need to convey the meaning. I've also seen it done as things changed to a different social context. For example, stores that are common in Japan and stores that are common in, say, America, when the dialogue is translated, because you want the timing for a joke, and you won't have the correct timing if they have to actually look up what the joke means. When you explain a joke, you usually make it not a joke, and you have lost the impact if you can't get it on the first try. If you have to explain a joke after you've told it, it's never going to be as funny as if they had got it on the first try, and they will always find it funny. But one of my greatest irritations is when people will take a word from another language, or a term, a phrase, and present it as if it means something completely different and has so many levels of meaning and so many levels of connotation, when it really doesn't. Or use a word that doesn't mean that at all. And worst of all, and this just is something that drives me up a wall, when you will use a word, but you don't know how to pronounce it properly. Like, one of the things that infuriated me was when The Ring was released, and they also released Ring, the Japanese original. For some unknowable reason, they decided to title it Ringu, which is a transliteration of the Japanese title, which itself is a transliteration of the English word ring. So there was absolutely no reason they couldn't just release it as Ring instead of The Ring, so people would know The Ring was the English language one that was made with Hollywood. This led to people saying it Ringu. I want to slap anyone that says it that way, not only because it's stupid and sounds stupid, but because it is a total butchering of the actual title and the word that the title means. Even in Japanese, if you were to pronounce it fairly accented, it would be ring. There is no ringu, it's ring. That's all it is. There is no reason to have that emphasis on that. It's like when you say ikimasu. You're not really even pronouncing the U. It is a su syllable, but you don't do that. That's not how you pronounce it. It annoys me the same way when people call it a chaise lounge. It is a chaise longue, a long chair. There is no reason why you can't call it a long chair, or at least call it a chaise. I actually lived in a place once where they had a main drag called Buena Vista. And do you know that they pronounced it Buena Vista? Buena Vista! So I think I have something here. I just want to encourage people, think about things, give them some rational thought, and have some respect for other languages, but not so much respect that it makes you blind to the society's and culture's problems, because it's one thing to enjoy output from a region or a people. It's quite another thing to hand-wave everything that is wrong or that has been done wrong in that society or in that culture, in that region, in that group, whatever have you. Nowhere on earth is a utopia, but nowhere on earth will improve if no one criticizes the way it is now. Complacency is one of the greatest enemies of progress, and you absolutely cannot become complacent with the way any place to live is. So anyway, in summary, don't be a dumbass and promote stereotype defenses that are still horribly insulting by painting a culture as completely inscrutable, and don't borrow words just because you're either wanting to impress someone or feel that the word is too shameful for you. Get over it. If you want to use a word, do it right. And if you don't think you can do it right, just use the word in your own language. There is virtually nothing that is not in some way at least approximately translatable from and to every language in existence. Respect words enough to use them properly, not try to pretend that they mean more than they actually do, and please, please, once again, if you can't, just use the word or the term or an approximation in your own language. No one will think worse of you for it. In fact, people will think better of you for it, because it's not something they have to look up and then find this huge debate on whether or not this is correct usage of that, because this person says it is and this person says it isn't, and nobody's actually looked to someone that actually speaks the language or lives in the country. Anyway, thank you for putting up with my kind of self-indulgent, migraine-fueled rant. Talk to you again soon. You're welcome. Bye.